Innovation and creativity are central to entrepreneurship. But what happens when you go beyond the edge? The Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast brings you the world's first, the disruptive, the avant-garde. We take you to the frontier in conversation with the entrepreneurs who are the forerunners of the industries of the future. Get to know their world with co-hosts Braden Kemp and Tracy Morningstar.
The health of bees. It's paramount to agriculture. According to contemporary data, bee pollination accounts for some 35% of global crop production. And in a landmark 2019 biodiversity report, we read that sacred passages about bees in all the world's major religions highlight their significance to human societies over millennia. In the wake of colony collapse and declining health, is it possible that pollinators could thrive once again with the aid of plant-based extracts? Today, we take you to the frontier of biosynthesis innovation with Ming Sun, COO of Nature Recombined.
Welcome back to the Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast. I'm Braden Kemp here with my co-host Tracy Morningstar.
Hello, Braden.
Today, we're taking you to the frontier with Ming from Nature Recombined Sciences, a company developing natural plant-based solutions to address the harms caused by excessive use of antibiotics, synthetic disinfectants, synthetic pesticides, and the like. Ming, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
I want to start by learning a little bit more about your path as an entrepreneur. I understand you're a molecular biologist with an MBA. You've published numerous patents in synthetic biology, an artist, a teacher, a journalist, a salesperson, a researcher. Obviously, you have a lot of things on the go. Why start a company, and how did you land on Nature Recombined?
Throughout my journeys, predominantly I've been trained as a molecular biologist. So research is always at the heart. And kind of the curiosity, I'm trying to understand things, especially how nature, how biology works, is always a major driving force behind a lot of things I do. So besides all of the different things that I've done in the past, I think, first of all, the team that I met to form Nature Recombined is the team that I've been working on all for many years. That all these co-founders that I met them probably 12, 13 years ago and did a number of projects in the past. So there's a good harmony and synergies about just the people ourselves. And it just came to 2020. It was just the beginning of the pandemic, whereas the few of us sat down and thought, what can be something that we do, but also just kind of shooting breeze and trying to just understand the environment at the time. And the first observation we had was that there's just copious amount of disinfectants that are being used. The people are just wiping everything. Lots of it are made based on synthetic chemicals. And the harm that are being done by a lot of synthetic chemicals is no strangers to researchers like ours. And also just couple that with the fact that we both have been in the natural kind of plant biology or molecular biology in that field for so many years. And there's that cumulative knowledge of the power from a lot of the natural plants. And then just kind of like those 2 points hit together, we're going like, okay, why don't we, develop something based on the natural plant that we know of? Then perhaps this can be used as a replacement for lots of these synthetic chemicals that are being used out there. And that's how the idea came about. And that from there, it's just the company started to grow.
Keeping a founding team together like that over that many years and through several companies, it sounds like that's a tricky thing to do. You must have found a group of people that really like to work together.
Yeah, that's right. People that are really gonna over the long term develop the relationships closer to a family, but also keeping it a professional.
Sure.
How do you balance the creativity and the technician within yourself?
So I also been doing art for quite a number of years, and just as the hobby, as on the side. So I guess there's less of a kind of mechanisms or a system, but it's more of just a long-term trial and error, start blending things together, and eventually they kind of work well together. But But yeah, I guess the creativities and the technicians in the science world, a lot of scientists are very creative, and that's how they come up with all these hypotheses and new ideas, right? And then they also, just through trainings, and develop a pretty good way to think pretty logically and to kind of stepwise prove their hypothesis or break another. It's a long-term practice of that. The two of them don't come in conflict, and that's I guess that's really how the biology research and how biology discoveries are made.
Can you give us a bit of an overview about Nature Recombined and maybe talk a bit about the focus of where the company is at right now?
Yeah. So like we said, started as just that small conversation. Can we harness the power of natural plants, something that's safe, and we know that can be efficacious against the different pathogens for different industries. And so the company started from there. That's the little spark. We started to explore and scan across quite a few different pathogens that cover many different industries. Some are hospital-acquired multi-drug resistant pathogens. Some are for cosmetic uses or skin pathogens. Some are foodborne pathogens that can cause food poisonings. And then that's just how we started. And then eventually what we landed on about 2 years ago, the chief science officer in the company came across the honeybee pathogens. There are 2 bacteria that are harming the honeybees. And then we knew just kind of from the media that the honeybees been an issue. The honeybees' health, their population has been declined pretty significantly. And they have such a strong and vital role in the agriculture pollination, something we absolutely need. So just this thing just hit and go like, oh, okay, these pathogens that harm the honeybees belong to the same class of pathogens that we've been testing and that we've been seeing great results. Shall we just add to our list to test? And then just from there, we tested and we saw very promising results, and then just allowed us to kind of shifted our focus and pivoted to the honeybee health industry right now. We're developing this product really to address a number of these bee health related issues.
We've been hearing about problems with bee health for quite a while. Is that something globally that we're taking as seriously as we should be?
It's a pretty complex issue. Is it pretty dangerous for the honeybees right now? Yes, it is. Because North America, if you see the trend over the last decade, it started from somewhere 15, 20-ish% of death over winter. And it just gradually been increasing to a point where 2 years ago, the deaths in Canada, US were very close to 50%. So half of the bee that year. And in the last 2 years, it dropped down a little bit down to 35, 36%. And this year, again, crept up a bit, depending on the province. Ontario lost just over 50% of bees for them in that province this year. So this problem is really just gradually going up. And it really is the example and speak to a lot of the harm that we've been talking about happen to human health and happen to the crops. Like the honeybees are dying not just because one disease or one pathogens. Several diseases and pathogens are on the rise because of the similar antibiotic abuse issues that humans have been seeing in their bodies. And now these antibiotics or drugs are being used predominantly in the field, and it causes the pathogens to develop resistance. And now they're becoming stronger, not just for us, but also for honeybees. And you couple that with all the pesticide uses that are in the crops where the bees will go and pollinate. And they will just come home and dumping their feet in all these chemicals that are being used on those crops. And those also causes harm to the honeybees. And then there's the viruses, and all these factors really kind of work in their own synergetic ways to harm the bees together. And you couple that with other indirect factors like the climate change. Some places it shortens the pollination season. Some places it's prolonged, some places it just fluctuates so much, it causes the bee to get confused. So when you add all of those together, it really is kind of putting the bees at verge of, very catastrophic loss right now.
What is the area of a bee? Or is it just within a certain acre? Or when you damage a group of bees, how does that affect the whole ecosystem?
They can fly quite a long distance, to collect the honey. Therefore, their exposures to harms, are no longer limited to a very small area, right? Even a lot of beekeepers, they prefer to pollinate just organic crops or crops that know not to harm the bees too much at the end of the day. But just given the distances that bees can travel, and also a lot of times maybe you have an organic yard on one side, but simply just a few meters across the street, you have a traditional grow up, right, of which pesticides are being used. So all of these kind of cross traffickings of different things will get passed on.
Because we've known for a while that bees are critical to the ecosystem, how responsive has the farmers been in knowing that we cannot not have bees?
Right. The fact that we cannot not have bees is probably pretty well aware among the farmers. However, if you dig deeper as to ask a farmer the pesticide or the herbicide that they have to use to protect their own crop growth, how that will impact the bee health in the long term, and what is the actual math that somebody can derive, give a farmer a formula to say, okay, if you use this gallons less of this will translate to this many bee pollinations, will translate to this many pounds of fruits that you're developing. Nobody get into the weeds and to understand, provide this math. So farmers, a lot of them are coming with a good heart and saying, yes, the bees are important. But on the flip side, I also need to use certain chemicals to protect my crop. So where does the balance sit? And that's where it gets really tricky.
So you have a solution or are working on a solution for some of the threats against bees. How do we balance this need for increased crop efficiency, increased yields? How do we balance the needs of using these synthetic chemicals for those things with human and pollinator health?
Yeah. So the product we're developing right now is, like you said, it targets certain areas of these threats. So we're just on the way of continuing to understand what benefits that can bring to the bees. Right now, after 2 years of research, what we have seen, for example, we have done feeding the baby bee larvae with our extracts and see how much stronger they can be in terms of deterring some of the pathogens, for example. And the result has been significant. Like we're seeing survival rates of close to 80% versus 4%, like without the protection of or the adding of our product to their diet, for example. And we also have seen other kind of immune boosting or health benefits from it. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. But we're continuing to kind of trying to learn more as to what other additional benefits there can be. And we're using something that's just purely natural. And our extraction process is very clean, very natural as well. So that's the whole idea.
Maybe this is a question for someone whose focus is entirely bees, but I'm going to throw it at you anyways. Is there a direct tie between bee populations and economic outcomes for farmers? Like, is it as simple as more bees is greater yield?
It's a good question. I don't quite know the exact correlation, but to a certain extent, there will be that direct correlation. The more bees there can be, the more pollination that you get, the bigger the yield. The other data that we frequently refer to is out of the 110 or 100 crops that humans use for human consumption, like 70 of them are populated by bees or pollinated by bees. So if we lose the bee population by 50%, as you can imagine, so how much impact there can be on the humans' activities. And there's some predictions, if I may quote, it's like if we lose all the bees in the world, and then the human race can probably survive just for 4 years.
Wow.
Or we lose all food. So yeah.
So when we talk about how critical bees are to global food security,
Right? It's a alarming number.
So can you maybe give us a little more detail around the threats that the product you're working on is targeting and how that works?
Yeah. So the way it works is we extracted a kind of cocktail of natural antimicrobials or other ingredients from the plant and like form what we call kind of like a natural cocktail, if you may. And the plant itself is very safe. It's been consumed by humans also as part of the food for thousands of years. So it came from a source like that. And with the efficacy right now, like I said, we're continuing to learn what kind of overall cross-board health benefit this brings. We're collaborating with a number of universities and academic labs and private labs, trying to have a better understanding of it. But overall, increases the bee survival rates and not harming the bees at the same time, and increases their defense, I guess, against the different disease pathogens. And we're trying to learn if it also helps them build their defense against other environmental stressors like pesticide or whatnot. At the end of the day, it also does not leave any harmful chemicals in the honey. That's another very critical thing. So you don't want the product from the bees again to get into your human system and then further cause any problems down, to the end users. So that's what we're working on.
That's interesting, and something I've actually thought a lot about. In my house, we use a lot of honey as a sweetener in place of sugar and maple syrup as well. And maybe it's a different conversation entirely, but you think what are these bees? What are they coming in contact with, and is there trace amounts of it in the honey, or is it processed out? It's just interesting to think about.
Right. Sometimes you also don't want to think that.
Yeah, sometimes you don't want to think about it. You just look at your beautiful jar of honey and think, look at all the health in that jar.
There you go.
So we're talking a lot about bees, which is great. We like to talk about bees, a topic of global importance. Nature Recombined wasn't founded only on that mission. Are you working on other products in line as well, or is the bee health kind of the core focus right now?
Yeah, the bee health is the core focus. Before the bee health, like I mentioned, we can adapt into several different other areas. We adapt into the food processing, some of these foodborne pathogens that are involved in it, like E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella, right? And learn about what kind of current solutions there are in some of these facilities and what they use. So this can be turned into a different area once we have the bee piece completed. Then also on again, our chief science officer always dreamed about eventually developing something for hospital acquired multi-drug resistant bacteria to fight against them, because we have seen great efficacies of our product to deter and to kill these multi-drug resistant bacteria pathogens in the past. So I will leave it for the future.
And how far is the product for bees? How far is that from the market in an ideal world? I know it sometimes takes longer.
Yeah. So the way it works is you accumulate maybe 2 years worth of data in the field to demonstrate that this thing really works well in the field, right, towards your final product design, and go like, this is what we're going to use it for. So we have done 1.5 years worth of field trials. And so the next year probably for us will still be a field trial to test it out under different climates. And then simultaneously now we're having conversations with Health Canada to try to get this product approved under one category, like the veterinary health product, so they can be applied to the bee industry. Now it's kind of just back and forth with the regulator. This is the part where it takes the most amount of time and also the most unpredictable. So, but we're on that journey right now.
Tracy, this is a theme that's been coming up in our conversations on this season of the show. So, Ming, we're talking mostly with agri-tech and kind of agri-adjacent businesses this year, and it's just I think people don't realize commercializing anything in agriculture is tricky for a whole host of reasons. But two of the major ones are, one, you're dealing with seasonality, so you can't just run trials over and over again in short periods of time. To some extent, you're waiting till the next season comes around, and for a good reason. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles that are in place that can take a long time to go through as well. We're learning more and more about that as we talk to more people in the field.
Yeah. You're collecting a good amount of data. All right. Yes. People waiting for new technologies to come to their hands, all talking about these two things mostly.
Are there other environments that you could look at that support bees that would get quicker results?
There are. That's the main driving force. Why we did a study in Mexico last year, because it's always a nice weather down there. So that definitely kind of took care of the seasonalities that we see here in Canada. We also been talking to partners in New Zealand, Australia, just kind of taking advantage of the turns of the seasons, change of the season. But then you also would bump into other complex real life matters as their genetics, whether it's the bees or it's the pest. It's a little different. And so like one we saw in the Mexican bees is very interesting. Varroa mite is the most destructive mite for bees right now globally. And the Canadian bees, a lot of times, if they go through above certain level of the mite load in the colonies, and it's very devastating for them. Whereas the beekeepers we worked down in Mexico, they're like, oh, our bees can tolerate a really high level of these mites. You just see them crawling around the bees, but the bees don't seem to get bothered. They're still as productive, for example. So yeah, and that's again, like Braden said, it's once you started the field trial, just so many complex factors that impact what you see, and we're gonna have to conquer that.
Who's the customer? Who ultimately buys the product from you?
Ideally, all beekeepers around the world, whether it's a commercial beekeeper or the hobbyist. I think just like any other livestock business, I guess, the more scale that you have, the more efficiency you require, and also the more challenges that you would have. Just kind of like when you have thousands of cows all crambled into a facility, or chickens, right? And there was disease might get passed out a lot quicker, stress is a lot higher. So in that sense, the same analogies to commercial beekeepers that are manages thousands of colonies and hives. And those are the ones probably need more of help like this.
In my knowledge of commercial beekeeping is extraordinarily limited to about 1 5-minute conversation with somebody in passing. But something that I found interesting that perhaps people don't know is some of these commercial operations are actually mobile. They're moving large numbers of bees long distances, in pursuit of pollination.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's also something I learned as I started to do more and more of this. I knew at least back in the days, and beekeepers here in Alberta, Manitoba, they would drive trucks load of thousands of hives down to California to pollinate their almond, down to the U.S., some parts of the U.S. pollinate different kind of crops, and then drive them back.
I'm sure there's some concerns with moving any sort of animal from one location to another. There's different diseases and pathogens and whatnot they might come in contact with that they otherwise wouldn't.
Is there several types of variety of bees, or are we just consistently seeing one type of bee?
Hey, great question, Tracy. There are different varieties of bees, right? Like the most managed bees in North America belong to one specific species and genus. So, it's also, everything's double-edged sword. Everything is not black and white. It's gray. So on one hand, you got one species, like it's, beekeeper knows, okay, this is the one that understands the traits and so on. It's easy for them to source and manage. But on the other hand, I mean, it's number one, if everybody is growing and managing just that type of bee, and then where do we live with all the wild bees? The wild bees are very important as well. And other species of bees, you need that biodiversity. All right. So that's another very, very important thing. Without biodiversity, then eventually you're coming up to a kind of unilateral genetics, and that's never going to be good. That's basically the end of the of that species, of that race, so to speak. Because so like people, they're like, for example, Alberta. I know that Alberta Motor Association is actually this year coming up with a campaign to help to raise the awareness of the importance of wild bees. And they're trying to set up bee colonies and tell people that, hey, like the commercial beekeepers and their honeybees is one, they have their own challenges that they need to be taken care of. But at the same time, you cannot just only focus on that. But please look at all the wild bees and all the other wild pollinators. And they're so critical too. If you lose them, that's also extremely bad news. Yeah.
Tracy, I have something that I want to end on, but I want to give you an opportunity. If you got anything else that you want to jump in with first?
I just wanted to say that I just recently watched a commercial where Woody Harrelson was talking about synthetic chemicals and how we use too many cleaning products. So I was just thinking it would be really cool to have a celebrity on board just to explain a little bit more about what it is that you guys do, because I think a lot of times it's just our lack of knowledge or even interest. And if we had more people communicating, the threats that are out there, maybe people would be more responsive.
Yeah, it definitely would be. I mean, like, that's why I know at least about two campaigns. That one was from Angelina Jolie, and the other, I think, was Morgan Freeman, at least in the last 2 years or so. And each came up with their own campaign. I mean, yeah, if you put me beside a Taylor Swift and talking about bees, I'm pretty sure nobody's going to listen to me. Everyone's going to go to her. That's the power of them, right? Like, so yeah, if there are more of these celebrities, like you mentioned, that talk about them, the better.
We need more bee influencers. We sent out a quick little questionnaire before we do these interviews, and once in a while something really interesting comes back, and your questionnaire had one of those responses. You described a resemblance between the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and successful entrepreneurial teams. And I've worked with hundreds of startups, and the same sort of themes always come up, but I have never, ever heard that comparison. Do you want to talk us through that a little?
Yeah, I do. When you asked me, who are somebody that inspired or influenced me a lot, and I tried hard to think about the real life examples, but the reason I talked about Teenager Mutant Ninja Turtles is, number one, because that's where I kind of first my things go to, because I grew up in Asian cultures and a lot of animes, and that's where the culture influenced the young kids. So, and the second reason I up to that is because I do see a lot of good things that are being taught actually in that. And when it comes to entrepreneurships, the more I learn, the more importance I will put on the founding teams of that company, of that project. And you really need other people to get on, to get your back, and then to work with you beyond just a professional kind of setting, even in the early days of entrepreneur journey. Because the way I always look at it is like a startup company is really like a baby, and whoever is there to take care of the company is like the parents and the family who takes care of the baby. So it goes beyond a professional setting. And in that Ninja Turtle example I gave, is I see it's a group of like-minded beings together, and they have share the same goal and share the same hobby, and they suffer together, living in underground sewer tunnels. And they don't just share the big, audacious goal at the end of the tunnel, but they also share all these little happiness in the daily life. And they don't get too much on, even they get onto each other's nerves. And they have a way, this beyond just professional contracts or whatnot to eventually settle it down, like brothers, like sisters. So that's the reason why I see that. And there's one thing I learned during MBA, which is about the number of people, which is very interesting because that tied to the communication lines, number of lines of communication that you can have. And a rule there is it's not like the bigger the better. And when a company grows to a certain size, communication becomes so complicated, and to a level, it really levels off the efficiency and becomes a big problem. Whereas in the startup team and where I see in the Teenage Ninja Turtles is that there are 4 people. 4 people is a pretty good number. I think anything beyond 6, it becomes very complicated when it comes to communications. So yeah, just the more I look at it, the more resemblance there are. And I like to use that example sometimes when some other friends ask me, like, what's your biggest learning through this entrepreneurship journey? And I'm like, okay, I found more resemblance than Ninja Turtles.
I think it's incredibly insightful, and I like it a whole lot.
Thanks.
Tracy, what do you think? A good place to end, or do you want to add anything else?
I was just thinking maybe that's a great place to end. But also I wanted to just throw a little thing in about
throw it
that.
in there.
Yeah, you being doing creative portraits. I see a little bit of your work online. Just a little bit about your creativity side.
I think is like if I try to find connections between in the science that I do and also the art that I do, it really goes beneath the surface of the work itself, whether it's the color, textures, the expressions, or, how I arrange certain things in my photos. But it just down below, most of my work got a little bit of a dark-ish kind of mysteric, that sort of feeling to it, or fantasy feelings to it. And just that part connect to the science itself. As science itself is still we know so little about. And there's a big part of me is driven by curiosity and trying to explore the mysterious things or like the unknown things. And that kind of translated into part of the art that I do. And then that kind of connects certain things together. All of these years of animes that I watched and saw when I was a kid, and there may be some underlying influences there, and so on and so forth.
Thank you for sharing.
Ming, thanks so much for joining us. This is really interesting learning about yourself and your business.
Thank you so much, Tracy and Braden.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Bioenterprise is Canada's engine for food and agricultural technologies, a vibrant community dedicated to driving industrial innovation. Learn more at bioenterprise.ca.
We return to the Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast with co-hosts Braden Kemp and Tracy Morningstar.
Tracy, that was fun. Ming is a really impressive guy. He's knowledgeable. He's multi-talented. He's a fantastic communicator, and I think someone you could talk to all day. And I come back to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles metaphor because it was so well formed. Or maybe it's just because I'm a 90s kid. But specifically, Ming said in his response to our questionnaire, you need people that can and are willing to suffer with you together, live in sewers together with you, and go through the same journey with you. And I thought it was just a really unique way to describe entrepreneurship without being pretentious about it.
And when I was reading that also, the first thing that came to mind was, yes, it's a team. It's a team of 4, which is what he's very comfortable with. But when I hear him talk about his team, it seemed more like a family. And this family is obviously has a true love for bees because the resilience of the bees, but also the vulnerabilities. And when we talk about family, we are at times vulnerable. We see that there's little things that could contribute to the balance. And I think they found that.
It certainly seems like it. And it sounds like they've been together on multiple projects for, 10 years or more, which is a tricky thing to do when you're talking about starting multiple businesses with the same people. So just a seems like a really good crew of people that are tackling what's a pretty serious challenge. And it feels good to have smart people working on things like that. I want to thank Ming from Nature Recombined again for joining us today. And thank you, Tracy, for another great conversation.
Thank you, Braden.
And we will see you next time on the Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast.
Next time on the Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast, join us in conversation with Dr. Morgan Wyatt, co-founder of Advanced Biofiber Technologies. We're exploring the world of natural, eco-friendly fabric design and manufacturing.
This edition of the Frontier Entrepreneurship Podcast was made possible with the support of FedDev Ontario and the Government of Canada. The executive producer is Robert Washburn. I'm John Hayden. To find out more, head to our website, nventure.ca. Thanks for listening.